Good evening. Welcome to the Policy Committee meeting, February 16th. Has the meeting been properly posted?
Yes, it has.
Thank you. And we have no public comment, it looks like, so we'll pass that by. We will move directly into the action items. First one is approval of the minutes from the
I've got it.
January meeting.
I move to approve the minutes from the Tuesday, January 19th meeting as presented.
You and I will second that. No discussion? All in favor of accepting the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
By the way, Corey is not with us this evening. And we have none in the legal category of policies. We do have, I think it's exactly 20 policies that we will be going through. Many of them are pretty straightforward. And based on previous discussion, we are going to just simply go through them, deal with anything that we question in them or feel with a change needed, or eliminate it for the time being. And at the end, we'll determine how many of these we can just take as a mass approval. Okay, Diane, too?
Sounds good.
Good. Okay, let's get started with, just a minute, I got to get caught up. Okay, this is policy revision 0100 definitions. And this one we had, many terms that we were, see, mine has been doing that on me. Can't open. Try again. There we go. We have definitions of many terms in here in alphabetical order. Diane, did you have any issues with any of these?
My only one it has to do with the definition of social media and how that's being defined. As I'm looking at the list, there are a lot of other ones that if we're going to try to have an exclusive list and it says apps and services shall not be considered social media unless they are listed on the district's website as district-approved social media platform sites, I'm wondering if we include things like WhatsApp and, you know, there's Instagram, Tumblr. You know, there are lots of other ones that aren't in this limited list that's in this new definition. That things change so fast. I really think by saying we have to have it listed, you know, we're setting ourselves up to not be able to keep up.
Well, it really says it is not limited to this list.
But then the last sentence says that it shall be not considered social media unless it's listed on the district's website as a district-approved social media platform site.
I didn't read that far. Thank you.
But I think that's the key. Like, there is district-approved social media. So the district has a Twitter page. The district has a Facebook page. I don't believe that the district has the district has a YouTube channel, but I don't believe that the district has a Pinterest, or the district doesn't have, its own, FaceTime service or whatever it is. So we have listed, I believe we have an Instagram, I believe we have Facebook, I believe we have Twitter, and those then would be, they would be considered social media for the district. Anything else then would not be. And so sometimes you get people who will use your name in another platform, and this is just the endorsement of those official Facebook page, official Twitter platform.
Okay.
So that's, I think, how we would distinguish between, like, what is, something that is a possible platform, like what's listed here, and then what's specifically for the district, and those are listed on our website.
We don't do anything with, WhatsApp at this point?
We don't have an official WhatsApp
Okay.
page.
What was that one?
WhatsApp?
Oh,
It's more of an international type of method of social media communication.
And we have a Facebook, we have a Twitter, we have a YouTube, and we have an Instagram. And you can see those clearly listed on the bottom of the page.
Those are, yeah, like with the little links of
Yep.
connect to this is the official one type of thing.
Yep.
Okay. And that when we're, then all the other ones that are listed here, that when I'm seeing Skype and Pinterest and LinkedIn and some of the other ones that are there, that's what made me wonder if we were looking at trying to be, a little bit more inclusive.
We could, we certainly could have like a LinkedIn as an organization. We could have an organizational LinkedIn page.
And I
if
think we
wanted
do
to.
posts on LinkedIn as a school district.
We may post positions on
Positions and
LinkedIn.
things like that, yeah.
But we have those 5 or 4 official social media apps that we use, and those are listed on the bottom of the page. So again, this is examples of social media, but we have ones that are formally listed on the district webpage.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else on 100?
I think the only other new component of that is just the legal records of legal custodian of records.
Oh, the definition.
Yeah, and so that's identified, and then it's further expanded in policy later where the superintendent is identified as the legal custodian
Yeah.
of records.
That comes up periodically in some other ones downstream, yeah.
Right. Another acronym, the DRC.
Yeah, used to be DEOC, right? Well, we'll find it. Okay, so we will hold that one off for subsequent action. 0121,
Just removes, so the old language in Neola was Board of Education. It was listed
Right.
over and over again. They've gotten rid of education, and in this policy, they've also eliminated the language hereinafter, sometimes referred to as the board. All of the Neola policies have become standardized to say just board.
yeah, and that's throughout the list. Okay, Diane?
Yep.
0143,
This one clarifies that the authority of individual board members, there is no individual board member authority, that all of the authority of the board member comes through the actions and motions and other official board business. It does not involve the individual. So it just provides that parameter on the individual board member. It's the body of 9 in our district that covers the business.
we've had this in conversations previously, so this isn't a surprise to anybody here. I hope not. Okay, Diane?
Good to go.
Okay.
The next one discusses the quorum. So the idea of 5 members present at meetings shall constitute a quorum because we have the 9-member board. When no board vacancies exist, that is, when there's a board vacancy, 1 or more, the quorum of that time shall be a majority of the members of the board. So if we ever went down to 8 board members, it would still be 5. If we were at 7 board members, it would be 4, just depending on how many active board members are on.
There's something, I got to read this again because there was something triggered here. Okay.
While you're thinking, I had never been aware of the negative quorum terminology. You definitely have heard of walking quorum.
Yeah.
But the negative quorum concept was new to me in this context.
Oh, it's in the green wording up there, Joel. When no board vacancies, let's carry on. Whenever the board has 1 or more vacancies, the quorum during that time shall be a majority of the members of the board. A majority of the members of the board could sound like 5. Should we not say majority of the members of the board in that situation or something?
Yeah, well, I think the way this is written is if say this year, 3 board members, well, we're coming up to the election. Say in January, 3 board members just decided to resign. And you'd have a board of 6 at the time. And then you'd be looking at what is your majority with only 6 board members. So, you'd use
This is
4.
vacancies. The word vacancies.
So if a board seat is vacant until the time that the board can appoint
Yeah.
people, then you would have, less than 9. And so that's what this is addressing.
Yeah, it's about vacancies. It's not about the fact that 4 people were in a 5-person meeting and you still had to have, okay.
Yep.
I'm okay with it. I think it reads fine when I go back and emphasize the word vacancies.
Right.
That's, anything else on 0162?
Not really. I think it's always good, though, for everybody to always make sure that they're paying attention to what the walking quorum is, because that can happen
Yeah.
always by accident. So it's just making sure that you have that particular piece, because it does extend to email and all that other stuff, phone messages. So
Just a clarification, does that pertain to each individual meeting, like each subcommittee, or just the full board of
anything that
9?
would constitute board business. So subcommittees do constitute the business of the board. So what we're talking about here, if just using this as an example, I clarify that. Like, Diane, if you had thoughts on a policy and you sent it to the whole group, or you reached out to board members individually, and then that somehow influenced then the discussion of what we were going to do, it would influence the board business. That could then be, a walking quorum. It gets bigger, obviously, as you look at the whole board and the potential board action. So it's always very, everything's got to be done in the public eye, except those few things that can be discussed in a closed session of the board. But again, it's when the whole board is present.
So in a subcommittee of 3 like this, do we have a walking quorum with 2?
If
Yes. If you and I had
outside-
gotten into a conversation earlier today and discussed something that was at issue here,
As a policy,
that's inappropriate.
Yep.
yeah, that's like just the clarification, that it's not just the 9 and 5 of the 9
Right.
No.
type of idea. We're talking about, even 2 of 3.
And,
Yep.
yeah, that's right.
Right, okay, and again, just for clarification.
Yep.
That was quorum 1, right? Okay,
Quorum, yep.
Now we are going to
Special meeting.
164.2.
Yeah, this
Come on.
this really outlines how we would set up a special meeting of the board. That you would want to, like a regular board meeting, is going to be posted. Usually I think it's like 48 hours is kind of the trigger to get a regular meeting scheduled. Special board meetings are those things that would happen 24 hours or less for essentially emergency reasons. So it goes on to list that.
There is an issue I have with this one, and that's again in the terms used.
Sure.
It refers to the clerk, capital C.
Yep. Formal position.
But we don't do a special meetings that way. You're the clerk. The clerk, the person setting the special meetings here is either the president or Sue.
Yeah.
Sue works for me. She does all my work.
Well,
should
no,
say.
I mean, the board president is the one that establishes that. The statutory language allows the board clerk to also establish the special meeting.
Okay, so the clerk is allowed to establish, the clerk being, in this case, Diane, not Sue. I mean, I was making
Correct.
sure, because Sue does all.
Sue's the secretary of the board.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to be sure of, is that we weren't having her do something that she's not supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
She's doing it at the
West of the board
service of
president, yes.
either the clerk or the president.
Yeah, the president, I mean, Sue's role in establishing the meetings is kind of a technical administrative type sense. It's not the actual, yes, we will have the meeting. No, I know Sue likes all of you and likes to be with you in meetings, but I don't think that she would randomly be the one calling the special meeting.
Right.
I see her working on behalf of the superintendent, saying
Correct.
it's time to have a meeting, or the president asking the superintendent to call a meeting, and as her role as administrative assistant. And she does. She takes all the minutes and gives me credit down at the bottom. So like I said, she does an amazing job and I get credit for it. It's quote unquote. But
Okay.
the one thing I thought that was really good about this policy, as rewritten, there's so much green. This is almost like a new policy in essence. Is that you can call a special meeting in 2 hours. So as we're looking at that transition criteria kind of thing, that we need to talk. We've got some concerns about where the numbers are at. That can be done in 2 hours, which is amazing, because I always thought 24 was the minimum
Not
time
that
that we
we've
could
ever
do.
done that.
Yeah, I mean, you'd never have, it's generally in an emergency type situation that you'd have to get people together. Not a common practice.
Yeah. Something pretty serious.
Right.
That was special meetings. Okay. 0167.3. Public content.
This talks about how an item could be agendized. Any person or group who would like to have an item put on the agenda shall submit their request to the superintendent no later than 10 days prior to the meeting. Their recommendation, the superintendent can recommend that it go forward, but the board president is ultimately the one then that places it on the agenda. And then it's clarified to say public comment instead of public participation.
Yeah, we were modifying some of that earlier this year, weren't we?
Yep. And then item H on here, participants shall address only topics within the legitimate jurisdiction of the board. This isn't the platform to bring water concerns or plowing of the city streets, or all of that is beyond your jurisdiction as a Board of Ed. So,
Again, I thought that was a very good addition to have there.
Yeah, I do too. In fact, we talked about that 6 months ago too, didn't we?
yeah, we clarified it used to be the idea of citizens to speak, and citizen participation. And so it was just more or less the public, and the public can be identified pretty broadly. But by the addition of item H, it really does say, yes, you can essentially come from anywhere, but it's got to be under the purview of the board to be able to address your topic.
Yeah.
Just a clarification, would then the president be able to say, if somebody gets up and does want to start talking about the streets weren't plowed properly, type of a thing, could that be stopped in midstream of that 3-minute?
Certainly, and that's where it's important to have people register prior to with the topic that they
And
want
what
to
their
speak
topic
to,
is?
because then that can be weeded out of the public
Screened.
comment. Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, they film out in advance. It goes up to the person that's chairing that committee, which is usually the president in our case. And if he or she saw something in there about complaining about taxes or something.
Sure.
City taxes, that one doesn't fit here. You just have to
Correct.
tell the person right up front. Okay, that's good.
And that is right on the sign-up sheet, so that can be a screener.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And that's going to be in advance now?
Well, we do have the process of signing up, so it's just a matter of whoever's chairing the committee then to follow essentially what's on that. So once this policy is approved, then that becomes implemented. And then the chair of the committee or the president of the board would go through who has ever filled out. And if it doesn't fit the committee or the work of the board, then it certainly could be passed on.
Okay, Diane?
I'm good with this one, too.
167.6.
This is email. It talks essentially about how it doesn't matter which email you use as a board member. The minute you start to engage board business on it, it becomes a district record and subject to open records requests. So any board member that is asked for, if an open records request comes in and it's for Mr. Baumgart, and it addresses playground equipment, and Mr. Baumgart was using his private email or his district email, he would have to turn all of those emails over to Dr. Siebert for part of that records request. So it doesn't matter which device or which email account you use.
And that's, again, a good clarification. The email address is not just limited to the ones supplied by the district,
Correct.
per se, as long as it is official district business. And I think that clarification, I think, is significant.
Yeah. And one of the things that I was wondering on, because this has happened where you get something on your personal email that's really related to the school, or district, I should say. I could send it from my personal email into my school email. Then it is on record.
Yep.
That can't happen. I usually try and tell people not to do that. I haven't got many of those, but
Yeah, the district email is the preferred email where
oh yeah.
all business should be handled from.
Okay. Diane, okay, move on?
Yep, here's the official definition of our DRC, District Records Custodian.
Yeah. We'll see that again.
Many times.
Personal communication devices.
So this one just talks about it lists the policies. We put this in place a few years ago for kind of the quick reference guide on personal communication devices, but these are the policies that would govern the board's use of technology.
It's really, all this is doing is changing the terminology in this, or to coincide with what it would be in that policy itself.
Correct, yes.
Personal communication devices, okay. Diane, okay with that one?
I am.
Legal counsel.
Yeah, this adds the language that the authority to contact such counsel for legal advice or assistance on behalf of the district shall normally be that of the board president and the superintendent unless otherwise specified by the board. So, we should be reaching out to our attorneys for the guidance that we need to address the issues, and it should be limited to that, for those purposes. So we just don't want people to reach out. There should just be a direct purpose to engage the attorneys, and that lies with the president or the superintendent in most instances.
Again, just a clarification of that. It's the shall normally.
Yep.
Would you be getting a slap on the hands if a different board member would seek out counsel directly? Is that something that would be inappropriate in terms of, as you're trying to clarify the protocols?
Yeah, it would be inappropriate if any board member besides the board president was directing it, or the superintendent. Obviously we have a, kind of a working relationship as to how those issues are addressed. You can, for instance, maybe a chair of a committee would be put in a position to do that for a contract, like, F&F might have to do that for some things, but again, you'd want the board president and the superintendent certainly in the loop on that.
I would anticipate that if we were to contact one of those attorneys directly, they probably know that they should say, you'll have to go through.
Well, that's something that we certainly can clarify with them, but
I think
the attorneys are, hired by the school district to represent the board in matters. So, this policy may be something that we need to clarify for all board members so that they're aware. Because the issues, are, again, when you go back to the first thing that we talked about tonight, it's like, where does the authority lie? The authority lies in the collective vote of the 9 members of the board, and it lies with the work that the whole board is doing. It's not, individual interests or individual perspectives. That all then should follow a process before we engage attorneys.
I think when we do this at the board meeting, that's one of the things I should highlight.
Yep.
Yes.
We'll want to make that clear.
Not that we disagree with it, it's just that
But clarification,
Needs
I
the
think
emphasis.
that's our policy, and that's and again, we can modify the policy. This is the time to modify if you want to, but I think that it's just important to realize that that's what the expectation is, what the proper procedure is, the proper protocol.
Yep.
Okay. 0174.2 School Performance Report.
This is just language that's
Just
getting
cleaning
cleaned
up,
up.
yeah.
They're getting rid of education, and then they're changing school district to just district. So pretty minor corrections to this one.
The way it reads to me. You too? Excellent. Oops, changed numbering. All of those 01s, from what I understand, would have been part of our bylaws.
They are the bylaws, and if you remember back to when we've talked about how this whole thing is laid out,
Yeah.
the bylaws are essentially how the board operates and the things that the board can do. And then the 1000 series pertains to the superintendent. And then the 2000 focuses on the programs that we offer as a school district. And then 3000 is professional, and 4000 is support staff, and 5000 is students, and so on through the book. So it kind of, how, if you had to design a school district, it's chronologically how you would have
Yeah.
to do that. So what we just talked about all addresses the board.
Yeah. Okay, and now we're moving into the 1,000 for at least a couple,
Yep. And this would be,
both involving the superintendent. 1220.
Yep, employment of the superintendent. The ad here is the tuberculosis screening questionnaire for the superintendent, and the physical exam. So it talks about that. It's the second to last paragraph.
Yeah.
This hasn't been changed since 2013.
Right, and if you remember back a few years, under the employment screening, we had that pretty lengthy discussion about doing a tuberculosis screener instead of a tuberculosis exam. That language is now being added into the superintendent selection policy.
Okay. That's the difference, yes.
So nothing inconsistent with how any other employee is being.
It's not a full exam anymore.
Not a full tuberculosis test.
Yeah, test.
I can't speak if Dr. Siebert had a physical exam when he started. I had one when I started, so.
Okay.
This screening even before this is policy.
Anything else on 1220? That was the only thing in there, right?
Yeah.
That changed? Okay. And 1260.
Yeah, this would be of the incapacity of the superintendent if the superintendent was unable to perform his or her duties. That the board will select an interim superintendent until the performance or the incapacity of the superintendent could fully be evaluated. Then the term by which the interim would be in place. And then the process to go about doing that.
Dan?
I couldn't help but think as I was reading this that this could be in the 2-hour category. Something's happened, the superintendent has been in an accident or whatever the case might be, heart attack, unable to perform his duties in 2 hours, get the group in and
Might have to move faster,
who's
yes.
taking over, type of thing. I just, as I read this one, it's like, well, that's what the 2 hours is all about.
Yeah, and we are very fortunate, in the size of our district that Dr. Siebert has a cabinet around him where, most of the everyday functions could continue until the board could convene to formally address this. But yes, it could absolutely be a emergency type situation.
Okay, 1260? Diane, okay?
Yep.
Okay, and now we're going to move into the 7,000s. That was a big jump. Video surveillance and electronic monitoring.
Yeah, we want to make sure that we
Oops.
publicize that we are going to be videoing and recording audio in areas, which you will see that around our buildings, that, this building is under video surveillance. then talks about the retention of that record. And that, we do a 7 days and then 14 days and then it's destroyed. And that's based off of how the technology is set up and the memory that we have associated with this.
With the option of keeping it longer if there seems to be a reason.
Sure, if there was an event, we could pull the recording and maintain it, yep.
Ann, anything?
You'd mentioned that it's actually in each building, like when, like are the video cameras in this building, that there'd be a note someplace identifying that as you walk in the
Yep,
door?
you'll see that it's posted on the doors.
Okay,
And if this is
haven't paid attention,
approved,
but
yeah, if this is approved, then we may have to update some of our signage, but we certainly can do that.
Oh, you mean that in fact that it does exist in this building?
We have the cameras posted, but it's the audio part that we may need to do updated signing on.
Okay. Good with that then? Technology privacy.
This adds the discipline if you refuse to open up your board-owned device for inspection. So if you're using the board's equipment, you really have no expectation of privacy.
Right. And that's just, it's quite straightforward in the one sentence.
Yep.
and then the sentence that's there in green is the one that was previously omitted. Is that the idea?
The green one is the one that's added. That's the new language.
And I think that's a powerful communication piece to staff members,
Yep.
that when you have your iPad, when you have your, Mac computer, refusal to permit such access may be grounds for discipline up to including discharge.
Yeah.
So I think that's, again, it's an important piece to be there, obvious,
Yeah. Okay, no privacy, and
Just a clarification, the write-up says that optional language in the policy is confusing and has been removed. The only red I see is the 2019 switch to 2020. So I'm guessing something has been cut.
What you see, yeah. So through the original drafting process with Neola and then with Human Resources, we've teased out some of what was there and present. And so what you see is what the final recommendation is to the board.
Rather
I'd
than-
have to go back into the packet
Yeah.
and look at the original.
Just because it says that, it's like, I'm not seeing any red for what was confusing.
we may have
has
cleaned
been
that
removed.
up last time already.
Yeah.
Those are Noiola's comments, aren't they?
Yes. Yep.
We may have already gotten ahead of that one.
Yeah, and maybe just to get rid of that explanation line. I have no problem with it. It's just that I'm looking for red.
Which policy?
In number 14 on
Are
technology.
you looking at the brief summary?
I'm looking at the
overview
brief summary
document?
line.
Yeah.
That's in board docs, and it's like, so I'm looking for what's being removed, and there is nothing red that's being removed. So I would just get rid of that line, because I'm happy with what's there.
I see a whole paragraph removed in the middle.
Did not appear that
Oh,
way.
okay. It is. It reads, district technology resources are to be used primarily for business and educational purposes. Because district technology resources are to be used primarily for business and educational purposes, staff members are prohibited from sending offensive, discriminatory, or harassing computer, electronic, or voicemail messages.
That's what's struck. from
That's
it?
what's struck.
That should
It's
be
not
struck.
coming
Should be struck? Oh,
Yeah, that's not.
I thought that was powerful language.
That's not actually
Okay.
highlighted in red on our screen. So
Okay. Give me just a second, I'll put it there.
I guess, well, hold on a second. Maybe I would ask the committee, would you like that language to stay or would you like that language removed?
I don't see it as confusing. That's,
Yeah, I think that's pretty direct, and again, letting people know that if you're using this computer, it should be for used primarily for business and educational purposes, and don't be doing anything offensive, discriminatory, harassing. Again, those are things that are just like, okay.
fine with that sentence.
Like I said, I didn't think that was bad, and so that was that. If you don't eliminate it, I don't think it's a bad thing.
Keep it deleted?
No, keep it
Keep it here.
as part of the policy. Don't strike
Okay.
So the only thing we're changing is adding the green sentence above that.
Yep.
When we make the action to take place.
That's the only change.
That's what we're doing. We're leaving the paragraph district technology, et cetera, in the policy. We are clear on that, right?
Got
Okay,
it.
good.
Then maybe it was best that I didn't include the other version.
I'm glad you caught that, 'cause I,
But then you can just get rid of that one line saying that there's something being removed because it hasn't been, so.
okay, which brings us to policy 8310.
So in the first paragraph, it's just,
There's actually three policies involved with this one.
yep, in the first paragraph of 8310, it's the language about the superintendent being the district records custodian, and then what the superintendent is required to do as the district records custodian.
Yes, that's the only change in there.
Then in 8320, the addition of the district records custodian is added.
Just the terminology, DRC, and
Terminology,
yeah,
yep.
okay. That's throughout.
Then in 8320.01, again, district records custodian is clarified in there.
Okay. 20, okay, got those caught up. Okay with all those, Diane? All right. Brings us to 8315.
8315, the public records policy is linked. That's just to reinforce the information management policy.
The Wisconsin Equal Rights Division has been placed in there in place of Civil Service Commission, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. It's just terminology from the agency.
Correct.
Okay, Diane, with these? Okay. Want to move to, oops, wrong, here we go. 8330, oops, fat thumb, just a minute.
This policy addresses student records, and the change to the policy is Neola has gotten out of the forms business. And so what they have done is just gotten rid of the language. They struck the forms that were listed in here from the policy. Most of those are handled locally anyway. Nobody was using the Neola forms, so they're not going to maintain those any longer. So that's the reason why it's removed from the policy language.
And that's it. It's like that form was removed multiple times, but
Yeah,
yeah, easy.
that's all it is. That's okay with you? 3330? 8330, I'm sorry, whatever. 8390,
Talks about animals on district property.
property.
And it puts a definition on there for emotional support animal. And then it goes on to clarify that an emotional support animal is not granted the same access to school buildings and classrooms as service animals. We're not required to grant student requests that they be permitted to bring an emotional support animal to class or on school grounds for any purpose. There's some clarifying language in there about, that animal being a service animal, and we have a process in place to address this.
Diane, sorry, I was reading and reminding something. Go ahead.
Just the notion of a psychiatric service animal, that I didn't realize that kind of certified, type of, process was available. And this reminded me so much of the airlines having to, put in some new guidelines because of all the emotional support animals that they were trying to have be on board the planes, et cetera. So it just seemed like a clarification that was needed to,
Yes, I agree.
fine tune.
It's not at all unique to us.
No.
No.
What is on the bottom of the green thing, the last C28 CFR 36-104? Where does that come from? Do you know?
That's the 28 CFR.
Yeah.
That, I believe, is the federal language around, oh boy.
Okay, so it's
It's
probably
just the legal, it's the legal language.
something probably coming federally.
Yes.
That's all I need to
This is federally protected.
Okay, that's fine. Nothing else on that. Oh, wait a minute. No, that's same subject. Okay, Diane, moving on. 8800.
It's just directs religious patriotic ceremonies. If you look in the third paragraph, it talks about policy 9700, relations with non-affiliated student group or non-affiliated groups. Then the district staff conducting these activities shall protect the right and privacy of non-participating students.
Go ahead.
I did not realize that we had an either-or proposition for either the Pledge of Allegiance or the national anthem
Yep.
each day, grades 1 through 12. I guess my experience for past practice was just the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yep. So everybody has to have the opportunity to participate, but we can't compel you to participate in it if you don't want to.
Right.
Yeah, it's in above that. It says there's no obligation, right? Okay. Done? Thank you. Last in this group. Wait a minute. Public requests.
We've talked about this policy a number of times. First and foremost, we have an obligation to protect our employees and our students from harassment, disclosure of confidential information, and other violation of the staff or students' rights. So we talk about that. This is not a policy to address personnel issues. We have a grievance policy for that. So it goes through what we shall do to address these concerns. The fourth level is the highest level of appeal in this. The district, so in the end, somebody must submit in writing the correspondence pertaining to the matter between the individual, the school, or employee. The board, after reviewing all material, may at its discretion provide the individual with a written response, grant an opportunity to address the board, or grant an opportunity to address a committee of the board at a properly noticed meeting. Then the other addition, the individuals shall be advised in writing of the board's decision or action taken, if any, prior to the following next regular meeting. And then the board's decision will be final. They may choose to consolidate complaints or other communications. So sometimes we deal with this policy, just a kind of a general concerns policy that if somebody had a complaint on it, bring it forward. So it's important to note, though, in level 4 that the board does not have to hear it. They can choose to reject it. So it's not an automatic that you get an audience with the board.
Would this include things like one employee accusing another employee of some activity? Action?
There are employee policies for that.
That's different?
Correct.
Okay. This is public.
This would be if the public had a complaint over the performance of an administrator.
Yeah.
And didn't seek or didn't obtain satisfactory remedy through administrative process, they could make an appeal to the board to hear their position.
So the employee does not fit in here. That's,
No, employee and employee does not fit in here.
that's okay. That's number 20.
That was number 20. That was number 20.
Okay, let me erase what I have to erase so I can get ready for the next part of this.
So this would be then, I think, where, just going back to the beginning of the meeting, where if you
Yes.
wanted to entertain the motion.
Okay, do we have a motion for approval of it is 20, policies as revised?
What's the best way to word that? To reference 1 through 20, just the.
I would say approve all 20 policies in this section as presented and revised.
I so move.
I second that.
As long as you've got it down, we're good.
And it is appropriate after a second to see if there's any further discussion on any of these items. Is there?
Just that I think a couple of things we pointed out that we should bring up to the attention of the full board when they look at these, just a couple highlight sentences. But, can we, in the same context there, just say we want to approve all 20?
Yeah, that would not impact the action.
No, no.
The
Procedural.
voting, but yes, that's true.
Yeah, that's all. I have no further
Okay, then all
discussion.
in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 2-0, Lynn.
Thank you.
Wow, we got that done better than might have been expected. Okay, we have another action item. This was a new policy, 8395, and we have had this one be, whoops, sorry, hang on. She's not liking me today, Lynn. There. This is a policy on mental health services. We've had a meeting on this. We've read it once and we're reading it twice, taking it to the board.
Yeah, I haven't had any,
March.
haven't had any feedback on this policy outside of what was discussed in our policy committee, just publicly and at the board meeting last week. So
Yes. So, approval at the committee to move to the full board for final approval. Do we have an action for that?
The second reading, I so move to take the new policy number 8395 on student mental health services approval to take to the full board for final approval.
Thank you, and I will second that. Further discussion?
I think the one thing I'd like to see us do when we bring it up at the full board is for the community to hear the response that you gave me last time about how all schools have access to therapists and how all the grants that we've been able to take advantage of over the last few years. And I think we've got an amazing program in place right now.
yes, we do.
And I think the community needs to hear that. And at the school board meeting, that might be the chance to be able to take a few minutes to be able to let them know. We're very concerned about the social emotional, health of our students, and this would let them know the many services that are in place to try to help the students in that respect.
And we can certainly work that into Mr. Baumgart's script,
would ya?
where we highlight that
I
because
just made a note for that, but that would be good if we could build that up a little bit.
yeah, I mean, last month, January, when this policy was brought to the full board, we talked about, providing an update. And it was the Friday after that, I think Luke Pinion provided a pretty lengthy update to the board on all of the things that we've done and the presentations that we've had. So we certainly can work that in then to the.
Well, and I felt really good about seeing that and realizing that. And it's like, I would like the rest of the community to know that as well.
Absolutely.
If
Yeah,
we
we're
can-
very proud of what we're doing.
Yes, we should be. That's correct. Okay, should we vote? No, we were discussing. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 2-0, Lynn.
Thank you.
Okay, now we have discussion of policy 0142.5, vacancies on the board.
Yeah, this policy, I'll ask Dr. Siebert to speak to it, but this addresses to what we do if there is a vacancy on the board outside of the election.
Yes.
Right. So thank you, Dr. Cook. So if you go down to the bottom, there is a checkbox, and I talked with Mr. Como about this particular box. It's under G. So should you get to a point where the board could not agree on a candidate, within 60 days, the board president has the right to appoint a person. And the checkbox would say, if we would check that, it would have to be from among the applicants who went through the process and the interview process. If you wouldn't check that, you could appoint someone who didn't go through the process. And he wanted your opinion as colleagues on the policy committee to think about if you would like to check that box or not.
So that box is an either or then. Checked, it means we would have to take somebody from the list.
Correct.
Not checked means you would be able to go outside of that list.
Yes.
Okay. I have a view. Do you want to make yours first? I don't know if you have a view on that or not.
Well, I'm saying, I'm thinking, as I look at this is a 60-day process where we've had people, applying and potentially interviewing, and it's to turn around and say, well, that doesn't matter. I'm just going to let the board president pick somebody that wasn't part of that process. Doesn't seem very fair to what's been happening up to that point.
One clarification is that this assumes that people actually applied
Oh,
to be
Yeah,
on the
there's-
board. And I think that that's something just to keep in mind.
okay.
That you could be in a position, and some school districts have found themselves in a position where they've had vacant board seats and nobody has put their name in for it.
It's a different situation.
That's it. Well, it's the same situation. You have a vacancy and you have nobody who's applying to take the vacancy. And if you have nobody who's applying to take the vacancy, could the board president then appoint someone who's not put their name forward to the board by submitting all of the things above?
So this specific question
Yep.
says we did have applicants and we didn't come up with a resolution. Is that correct?
This assumes that you had applicants and the board does not have agreement.
Right.
But if you don't have applicants to fill the seat through the process above, does the board president then have the ability to appoint someone?
Is that defined in here?
That it is not.
Okay. So it seems to me we have to deal with one issue or the other. The issue we're dealing with this check mark is where we did have applicants, but in 60 days we were not able to come to a conclusion. Okay.
I see that as being almost like an H.
As a what?
It's like set up another item H. Because what this is saying is here, where everything is rolling along, we've got the procedure going on, we've got the interviews, and then G is saying appointment by the board to fill the vacancy shall be by a majority of vote of the existing board. Okay? And like that explains all of that up above. And then now it's like, okay, H, what you're saying, this hasn't worked. Now it's time to get somebody in that position, that's really, a new thing. I see G, the first sentence, finishing a procedure, and this is that didn't work, what's plan B?
That's another way to word this, but that's really not the question we're having. The question we're having is, quite simply, in that situation, do we want the board to pick from that list, or do we want the board president to pick from that list, or do we want to let him or her go outside of the list? Right?
Correct.
In my mind, I would rather give him or her the option of going outside of the list, because maybe there is somebody that would come, for instance, somebody might want to come back. So my comfort would be to not check this mark.
Okay.
Now, we have to talk about the other thing separately, but
Well, if you don't check it, then you're not obligated to it.
that's right. So I'm saying, I don't know if it's a vote yet, but my position would be to not check the parentheses.
And not tie the president's hands.
Right.
Yeah.
And
I agree.
if you don't check it, and then to Dr. Cook's example, you don't get any applicants, that frees the ability to pick someone as well. So by not checking it, I think you address both of the
Yes, you do.
circumstances.
That's the way I would read that.
Do you see what I'm saying, though? It's really like, through G, it's been filled, everything is good. Now we're looking at if the vacancy is not filled. It's really like another idea,
Well, you're still dealing with a vacancy, Diane.
but the appointment by the board to fill the vacancy shall be the majority of the board to the existing board. It's like, this is what was supposed to happen. It's done. Where that, if the vacancy is not filled, is like really like another procedure, like how are we going to handle it if that didn't work up to that point?
That's where the board president, after 60 days, would have the authority to appoint. And if you think about this broadly, yes, you may have a situation where you get 5 quality applicants and the board votes and picks one of the 5. You likewise could also have 5 people put their name in, and that would not be palatable to the board members present. And then that could run its course for 60 days, and you could pick whatever issue it might be, but it just, it could be an issue for the board. And then this still then would say, okay, board president, you can bring somebody on or grab from this group. It's your discretion to fill that last board seat. So, the process does run its course, and either through the board vote, you have a person, or without the board vote, the president in 60 days can appoint.
I don't think we should check the box.
Huh?
I don't think we should check the box.
Okay, so we agree on that. Not going to check the box. I don't see that we have an issue with the G and the H myself. I'm fine with the way it is.
Okay, and that's fine. That's the way it's
Oh, yeah,
presented.
okay with that?
That's good.
Okay.
So it's discussion this month? It's not action?
This is strictly a discussion, the way I read it's a revised policy, which will go to us once, and we've read it, and then it goes for final approval to the board? So,
Next
What has to-
month, a committee for approval.
So we make that decision.
oh yeah, I'm sorry, it
After
doesn't go to
another
the board. Committee, right there.
So what I will do is I will not just remove that language since it was a choice, I'll actually strike it through to remind us that we talked about it, elected not to take that language,
Oh,
and then it can be approved next month,
so then it just ends after board president, period.
period. Yep.
Vacancy shall be filled by appointment of the board president. It does not limit him or her.
Right, no limitations. That sounds good.
Yes. And yes, you can just strike that, Lynn, because then we don't need that check mark. Not checked.
It's just not there.
It will confuse somebody.
Well, it was confusing, like,
Yes, I agree. Okay. We okay with that one then? And we have, these two are slipped in on us. Last week, right?
Mr. Clark and Ms. Stack in the business
That darn
office were able to get this. If you look at the policy language in 6114, cost principles spending of federal funds, these are the rules, and there's very technically adept people in our business office who really have an understanding of this, in its entirety. But there's rules associated with spending federal funds from federal grants. And so this talks about how you can spend that money, the period of time in which you can spend it, the purpose that you can spend it, and then the accounting behind it, making sure that, that we do the work on the back end of the books to make sure that it was spent appropriately. It talks about something called period of performance. So the district budget, is a July 1st to June 30th budget. The period of performance on a federal grant might be January 1st of 2021 to June 15th of 2022. And so it sits in a different budget cycle. And so I think that that's something that's important about the federal dollars, especially for members of the F&F committee. You can see that things don't necessarily line up with our regular books, and
Diane, do you have any questions on this?
No, I found it interesting to see the 15 months plus another 12 months because of the educational kind of thing. And a lot of the grants we've been looking at now related to the pandemic are like, well, it's, this fiscal period, that fiscal period, I can totally understand that they need to have this extended time period to know if the grant has been, given, if, all these kinds of differences that go along with the process. The decisions that need
I,
to
for
be made.
one, think Darren will handle it very well.
Yep, business office will handle it. And if they don't, the auditors will come in and say they didn't. And the beauty of the audit report.
Yeah.
And I have a point of I
Please.
guess, as I look at this is the tiniest font I've seen in any of our policies.
You took that away from me.
And at home, I could on my big screen, I could
blow
make
it
it up to 150 and actually read it. Right here now, I'm having a really hard time on this in this context.
It's hard to read.
Well, that's Micron font. I'm sorry.
Well, you can expand
At
it.
150%, I could read it.
I had to do the same thing in my office, and that was on my computer as well. There's so much language in that policy that the font size did condense.
I thought it was just me with my older class, my old eyes. Okay, so we're going to let that one go through. And we have another one right behind that. It's 6325.
Yep, this just talks about procurement, so getting things through the federal grants. Talks about having written procurement procedures, the methods. So it goes through informal procurement methods, micro purchases, small purchases, which never until I saw this policy did I know there was a difference between a micro purchase and a small purchase. And then the formal procurement methods. Then that there is just, an interesting, part of this policy that there's a domestic preference component. So it's a Buy American component to it for federal grants,
Yeah,
which is nice to see.
we're practicable. I hate that word.
Mr. Baumgart.
Yes, I'm sorry.
On page 4, there are a couple things right above that domestic preference in green that it looks like we're changing proposals to procurement in number 3 right above,
Correct.
but it's not in, the color stuff isn't happening. It's not color coded for us in terms of like proposals being deleted, procurement being,
I'll show that
Language.
to Lynn when we're back at the office.
I was gonna say, and then under sub 1, the micro purchases idea, looks like that should be another green. And then publicizing in number 3.3. This looks like it lost the color.
Yep.
Are those removal or just,
Anything that's struck through would be otherwise in red and then removed. Anything
that's
underlined
proposals.
or in green would be in addition.
so micro purchases and publicizing should be in green?
In our usual color coding.
Micro purchases would be in addition in green. Publicizing A would be in green. Procurement would be in green. Proposals would be in red by number 3 there. Yep, we can make sure that that's
Just for the next time.
updated. Yep.
Okay, well, that's being cleaned up, but you've got the wording, right?
Technically, yep.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
we're
not
on-
a change, it's just a matter of being the color coded.
Yeah. So that was 6325. So these we have read, and we'll bring them back for reading and approval in March.
Correct.
And okay?
Don't even have to make a motion.
No. But we have an exciting one here in section H. Small unmanned aircraft systems, otherwise known as drones.
Drones.
What are we doing with those things?
Well, drones, we've used drones for construction purposes.
Sure.
To evaluate roofs and then to also take pictures of the progress that we've made There's the potential to use drones, for instance, to cover a sporting event if it was required or something outside. All of those things would be appropriate use and given permission through the school district to the person using that.
Oh, the superintendent.
The superintendent or designee. The stuff that we wouldn't want, though, would be people just showing up at a high school and using their drone. The high school being the place where they're flying it around. I mean, that could cause all sorts of problems. You think of like Meadowbrook's proximity to the airport. You could have issues if it was there. So we wouldn't allow just casual use. It would have to be a purpose, and then the person would have to be licensed as is spelled out in here.
Some time ago, probably in our science program, somebody was dealing with drones. Did that ever come into our curriculum, or do you know if anybody's doing that?
They may do demonstrations, but I don't believe it's not written into the curriculum.
Okay, so that would be with permission also?
Correct. If it was part of the curriculum, it would be, or if there was a school demonstration, it could be. Again, I mean, the term superintendent under Neola, could extend to the principal to grant permission for something.
Okay, so that can be done.
That can be done.
We're not eliminating it, but it can be done, but under permission.
Right. But if I got a drone for, whatever, for fun, I couldn't use West's property to fly the drone around. That would be prohibited.
Right, correct. And all the other terms that you talked about would be permitted, and some of those would be done with a contractor?
Yeah, so Fiddendorf has the drones to do that. A lot of roofing contractors now have moved to drones to study roofs. It's just a safer way of taking a look at what's going on. So those would be things that would be permitted.
And they would be permitted, but they couldn't just show up and do it.
If we contracted with them, we would know how they were going to evaluate the roof. So if we got into a roofing contract, yes. I mean, Tim Williamson or Darren Clark would know that they're going to look at the roofs using a drone.
Okay,
And that would be an acceptable situation.
got it. That sounds like, and that is a new policy. We don't have any policy on that right now, so.
It took Neola several years to try to put this one together because of all the nuances.
Okay.
That's just discussion items. We don't need a motion.
Pardon?
Just a discussion item. We don't need a motion.
Right, and that brings us to the end of that entire group of policy actions and discussions. We have a further discussion in the area of bullying, anti-harassment, and hazing. And this came up, as I mentioned, at our most recent board meeting.
Yep.
And Joel?
So we brought you 3 policies that kind of cover this idea. The first policy is bullying. And what our obligation is to prevent bullying and how we define bullying and how we investigate bullying. So that is the bullying policy. It has the complaint procedures. I think some of the concern is what should a staff member do if they experience or if they observe it. And if you go under complaint procedures, the 3rd paragraph, all school staff members and school officials who observe or become aware of acts of bullying are required to report these acts to the building principal or assistant principal or the superintendent. So there is the reporting requirement spelled out here. If you look in our anti-harassment policy, what's the line between bullying and harassment? Harassment, there are clear definitions in here of bullying, of harassment, of sexual harassment, and it gets very specific as to what, could be considered sexual harassment and such. Sexual harassment, has its own protections, discrimination, Title IX. We have a Title IX policy. We didn't add that in there, but harassment does have a formal complaint and investigation procedure included in it. So if you look at reporting procedures, it's on page 5 of 9 of the policy. It lists me and Sharon Thede as the compliance officers. It has the investigation and complaint procedures. It's a very detailed policy, and it does talk about how we must act when we hear of harassment happening in the schools. We also have a policy against hazing, and hazing, those, I guess, I don't know what would be the old, the
Athletic teams?
yeah, athletic teams or clubs, the kind of the indoctrination rituals that used to be associated with them. We prohibit hazing in all of its forms. And then in the fourth paragraph, administrators, faculty members, and other employees shall be alert to the possible situations, circumstances, if it's discovered, what we should do. So you see 4 points there of what must happen if you are aware of hazing. And so the district, as a whole, and I think that this gets to what Mr. O'Brien's question was, do we have a reporting procedure? Yes. Do we take this seriously? Yes. Situations of harassment are investigated at the district level. Situations of bullying are investigated at the school level and sometimes involve district administration. When needed, we engage our SROs to help address some of these things. We have all of the reporting requirements for abuse and neglect, and we must follow those. We do train our staff in the mandatory reporting of abuse and neglect. If the situation triggers abuse and neglect, we make sure that we engage the appropriate authorities or county services at that time. So, we do extensive work around this.
And I don't know if statistically or just by gut feel, has this been productive or not over the last couple of years since we got?
I think, the more detailed, I think we've done a better job of investigating harassment and discrimination and things of that nature as a result of this. We do a thorough job of investigating bullying, and we've normed that across our system. We've come up with common forms, things that people must do at the school level so that it doesn't get forgotten about or steps aren't missed. The idea of being more productive, these are very time-consuming investigations. I can assure you of that. They're very thorough, but they do, they require extra work, to try to determine, if in fact we want to make sure that if it is there, that we do a good job of identifying it so that we can intervene appropriately. There's been a trend towards, if you think about like kids. Think about the idea of bullying. Two kids getting into a fight or a disagreement, that's not necessarily bullying, right? We have to investigate it. It's not necessarily bullying. But society has kind of tended to say my child's being bullied by someone. And what we've found in many instances is that it's not in fact bullying. It was an argument. It was a one-time fight. There's consequences for those things, but we've really done a good job, I think, of teasing out what is bullying versus what is general disagreements among youth.
That's a good way to explain it. I remember when Mr. O'Brien asked the question last week, I wasn't real sure, because he asked it relative to another policy, and it was not a real connection there, but he was asking a legitimate question, but I didn't know if he was seeking, here's all we've done with some policies to address the issue. That's one thing. There's been a result. That's another thing.
Yep.
I think in answering him, maybe to just do what you just did this afternoon. This is what we have in place. We've done a solid job of investigating issues that come up in those three categories. And
But you think about it, like just hierarchically across the system, the things that we've put in place, school psychologists, school social workers, school counselors at the elementary level, teaching the guidance curriculum, working with peers through issues, the implementation of our social and emotional learning curriculum. Those are all proactive things and kind of level one interventions to things. At the middle level and the high school level, our SEL curriculum, making sure, again, that we have the psych social workers and counselors in place, that we have the reporting procedures in place for students to, report where, the issues that they have. So, we do a lot on the front end that we have updated the board on, throughout the last 3-4 years, just our efforts towards, when you hear SEL, think, anti-bullying, think getting along better, think mental health prevention, think a lot of that when you hear SEL, because that's what's addressing, that's the proactive work we're doing to prevent bullying, to prevent harassment, to prevent more significant mental health need in our schools.
Yeah, and I think maybe those are all part of the answers
Yep.
that we should bring back to the board next month.
Yep. I can work with you, Mr. Baumgart, on this script and.
Yeah. Diane?
I was very pleased to see how much, of the policy refers to cyberbullying, realizing that
Yeah.
Neola first put this in place in 2014. So that's really a relatively long time ago to be able to be spot on
Yeah.
in terms of the form that bullying has taken, in this technology age.
Yep.
So I was impressed to see how it was still a good, solid policy with those kinds of references that I was guessing, it's not going to be up to date. Because the first thing I do is look at that kind of, when was the last time this was reviewed? But, they really have done a very nice job. And I want to compliment the district because I wouldn't have pulled out student hazing on this based on the question that came up at the topic reference. But when I think of how the district has addressed the idea of student hazing, that was so bad years ago. And, once it became
Not real many years ago. Yeah.
not really. Well, it's in my limited kind of experience of teaching. There was trauma. On freshman kill day. The freshman hallway was right behind my classroom, so I experienced it very much firsthand. And, and just opening it up to have the freshman transition experiences and the freshmen working with seniors already the summer before they come in and all these kinds of things that we've done in the last dozen years has been amazing.
What was that term for that thing about getting this freshman, not initiated, I don't want to use that word, initialized?
Well, that was the term in many areas was the initiation.
Yeah,
Right?
but we have, in the last couple of years, we've had, I don't know, for juniors or seniors, actually working with the freshmen.
Right.
Right,
on
and
a
that's
come in positive level.
that's the ignition programs that they
Ignition
have at the
program,
beginning
okay.
of the year, the freshman startup programs,
Yeah, and
the
that's-
leadership academies that some of the schools run. There's a lot of things that we're doing now that we weren't doing a number of years ago. We've got great principals and great advisors at the school level who are recognizing needs building by building and building support in for
I've had
kids.
positive results from that.
It's been amazing. And I've been out 6 years, but in the initiation, the hazing that would happen when they were coming onto the football team or coming onto whatever sports team, there were some really nasty things happening. Across a lot of. Now I shouldn't pick on football because there were a lot of some of the other sports were just as bad. Female sports. Just stupid kinds of things that were happening. Almost likening to the kinds of things that were happening on the college campuses with some of the Greek life. Which was just got way out of hand.
I think we
So-
pretty well flipped that all the way over.
Like I said, I'm seeing this as 2018, and there were some really, really positive things that have happened. Before 2018, like I said, I'm just comparative, the 2014 type of thing, 2018. This has been an evolution, and it's worked well. And I'm hoping that our anti-bullying you'll have the same kind of impact as we focus on it.
Related, yeah. Excellent. So maybe we can work through something.
Sure, and we may also then be able to work with Mr. Dietz and Ms. Landish on doing a more formal presentation at Teaching and Learning sometimes, because Luke Pinning has done many presentations on mental health, on SEL, all of that at Teaching and Learning. We may have had the policy discussion today, but we can do more of an informational thing for more board members at TNL, next month or in April, whenever it is, and talk about that, because you can tie so many of these efforts together There's a policy, and the policy sets the expectation, but the policy isn't the practice. So we can talk more in depth about what it takes to investigate these things and how we take them serious. But while that's important, the important work is happening on the front end, and it's everything that Mrs. Voigt has talked about the freshman ignition, the peer mentoring, we can put that together and do a more informative thing, because this isn't just trying to sound as a defeatist, but for as long as there have been schools, we've been dealing with issues of bullying. We don't want to just approach those things reactively. We also want people to understand that we're doing a lot of proactive work to prevent that from happening.
Work is a good word.
And I think, in many instances, if we were to talk to our middle school and high school principals and assistant principals, they would probably share that a lot of what they deal with is stuff that's happening in the cyber world outside of school. And, that is the place that while we can do the education and the proactive work, that's then where the parent monitoring, that's where, the discussion around when is it appropriate to give a child a cell phone, when is it appropriate to give them the social media and all the messaging that's associated with those games and apps and everything like that, because that all runs together too. The Atlantic did a really good article a couple of years ago on the iPhone generation, and one of the main themes of the article was this generation is physically safer than all the generations before. Fewer broken bones, fewer car accidents, fewer all of that. But they're more mentally needy than others. Their emotional need is much higher. And that's a result of, they talked about the impact that technology has had on kids. Perhaps something to read in your free time, because I thought there were some pretty good points there. In the Atlantic.
Have it?
I could email it to you. I could find it.
Oh, it's
Or just have it in the Friday
online.
packet, kind of just a reference to that?
Yeah, I can take a look. I can see if I can find it for Friday or next Friday. Maybe we could pair it up with a more broad SEL update, and we could put it in next week.
That would be
I
neat.
think this fits with F, too, the idea of that the mental health services, et cetera. It really
Yeah.
kind of dovetails in that, because that's one of the proactive pieces that, is in place to try to help to, address this issue.
The work doesn't sit in isolation. I mean, there's so much of it is interwoven that, the idea of relationships, right? Like on the front end, the relationships that teachers develop with students and aides develop with students, that gives kids a safe space at schools, an adult that they can reach out to, a trusted person that they can go to. And if they can reach out to that person when things are early, then you don't have to deal with more severe cases of it. And, that's all the important work that you see happening in schools on a regular basis.
Good.
That's the peer mentoring, some of those
It's
other kinds
peer
of.
mentoring, it's the adult mentors. We talk about the academic success of our students, and certainly that's important, but there's a lot of work that's done to make sure that kids are safe and comfortable in the classroom so that they can be in a position to learn. And that's, there's a true art to that, and our staff demonstrate that every day.
Okay.
Good stuff. Lots of good stuff.
Lots of good stuff.
Well, that brings us to almost to the conclusion of the meeting, which is the recommendations for future meetings. Is there anything coming up that we should know about?
You got the big bundle in front of you right now, so
Yeah.
that's what we'll be focusing on for the time being.
Okay, it'll keep us busy for a while. And other is needed, nothing?
I just want to again commend you for your leadership using board docs, and this is really all I needed to be able to come to the meeting tonight, because everything was all. I printed out a couple of these documents because I wanted to reference the
But I
anti-bullying.
guess I got to get warmer fingers, because I was having nothing but trouble getting this thing moving tonight.
But you did an amazing job, compared to having, it would have been a pack this thick, times every board member.
Yeah, but I felt so bad for Mike bringing the stuff to the house, and all he had was 2 sheets.
Well,
Okay.
next up, maybe the weekly updates in board docs.
Well, we'll see.
Thought.
So, anything else? Nothing? Jim, thank you for being here again. With that, our next meeting will be on March 16th, I believe, right? February and March do that for us 3 times out of 4, so. With that, we are adjourned.